Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kim Plomp. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, studier of ancient DNA and Ice Age megafauna.
And today we're reviewing a movie called Eegah from 1962. I didn't know anything about this movie when I suggested it, except that it was freely available on YouTube. And I have since learned that it regularly makes the lists of the worst movie of all time.
Yeah, which I have no argument with. I feel like we've seen worse movies.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's terrible, but in a amusing way. I mean, it's got 2.2 out of 10 on IMDb, which, and it's not even as bad as like half of the films that we've seen, I would say.
It has 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really? Wow. That's oddly impressive.
I feel like about half the time it's so bad it's good, and the other half the time it's just so boring.
Yeah.
I didn't even think it was so bad it's good. I just thought it was incredibly boring.
I watched mine on YouTube at 1.5 speed, so maybe things happened a bit faster on the version I was watching.
Well, it's only an hour and a half, so it's not that hard to get through.
No.
Who wants to summarize this one?
I'm happy to give it a go. I can't remember who did the last one.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Eegah is basically exactly the same story as Trog, which we watched like not too long ago.
It's also basically the same as King Kong.
Yeah. It's that kind of classic story progression, but with some interesting kind of 60s Mondo style vibes to it. So it's got a long kind of intro where you see like spooky cave and kind of mummified fossil ape people, and we get introduction to all the kind of casts. So we have Tom, who's the young hip cat. We've got Roxy, who's his girlfriend, who's like sexy and swinging. We've got Eegah, who doesn't appear till later on, and we've got Roxy's dad, who's like a rich industrialist stroke. We never really know what he does, but he's got lots of money. So it kind of opens up with a big sort of, I've written down big stoner vibes, so it's kind of a bit kind of Technicolor, like you can imagine that they would want to open on kind of beach volleyball kind of style sort of thing. And we meet Roxy, who's a hottie in a convertible. She rolls up to the gas station where Tom is working and sort of arranges to meet later on at some hip club. She's really interested in Tom. She shows him that she's got a very tiny swimsuit that she wants to wear later on. We get the vibe immediately. There's some comic relief where Tom proves to be really rubbish at his job, which is to fill cars up with petrol, but he's so besotted with Roxy, he doesn't realize he's overfilling one of the customers' cars. And that's really all the setup. So we have Tom and Roxy, who are a couple, very like hip and swinging, and that's all you need to know. And then Roxy drives off in her cool car through the kind of Californian hills, and then she manages to almost hit a caveman with a club. And the caveman is played by Richard Kiel, who is actually like a giant. He like grew to like 7 feet tall. Most people will know him as Jaws from the James Bond films, but he's also been in like tons of classic films like Happy Gilmore, which he's great in, where he plays like a kind of gentle giant.
With a nail in his head. Yeah,
that's it. But very eloquent with it. But also he's the alien in the very, very classic, almost archetypal Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, which is just a fantastic episode, a great short story that it's based on. So Richard Kiel has some pedigree. He's probably the most famous person in this. He's like 7'4" or something. He actually has like some form of pituitary, or had some form of pituitary gigantism, maybe acromegaly or HGH overgrowth, that sort of thing. But in this film, he's playing Eegah. And so he is what we've seen many times in the past, a caveman who just kind of gibbers and grunts and seems to have no language except for his own name, which he says more often than Little John in a song. He just says Eegah all the time. And there's no explanation for why he's there, why he's in the California mountains, pretty close to central LA, I'm imagining, and getting run over by Roxy in her convertible. But he kind of menaces her a little bit, and then kind of waves his club around, and then she manages to kind of fight him off, and he runs off into the desert again. And she kind of composes herself. I think Tom kind of comes up behind her in his car and sort of almost rescues her, although she's managed to rescue herself essentially. And they drive back shaken to LA. I'm assuming it's LA. It's somewhere in California's West Coast. And the next thing is they're meeting with Roxy's dad, who appears to own this very fashionable club where they're having dinner. And Roxy's trying to explain to her dad and his crony that she saw a giant. And nobody believes her, but she really did see a giant, and he was scary. And he had a club and all this kind of stuff. And her dad, being a good dad, believes her, despite it sounding like absolute bullshit. And his reasoning is that, well, there were giants on the earth in those days. The Bible says so. Which really is as much of a scientific explanation as we're going to get in this film, right there. But yeah, Roxy's very upset that nobody believes her stupid story about seeing a caveman in California on the road. And she makes Tom swear that he does believe what she said. And Tom says, "I swear on my Elvis Presley LPs." That's how hip and happening Tom is. He knows all about the good music. And then Roxy also says, just out of nowhere, that she thought that the caveman was cute. So it's that kind of film, very much.
Yeah.
All that kind of
He
stuff.
was cute.
He was cute, yeah. I mean, there's no denying Richard Kiel was a handsome guy when he was younger. He's not portrayed as handsome when he's playing like the baddies like Jaws and dressed up as aliens, but he was clearly a good-looking guy in his younger days.
I mean, to be honest, with a little bit of beard conditioner, he could like own a coffee shop. Right
Absolutely,
now.
yeah.
With that beard and that hair, like it was fantastic.
Good hipster vibes. But yeah, Roxy's still off on her "nobody believed me" tip. So she gets Tom and her dad to drive out to where she saw Eegah, the caveman, and they find a footprint, which couldn't possibly have been faked or anything like that. They find a footprint in the sand, which is enormous. So that's great. So now everyone believes her. And Roxy's dad decides that he's going to go and find this caveman because it's super important, despite him not knowing jack about shit, it seems. So the dad's going to go up Shadow Mountain. Tom offers his dune buggy, which has apparently just been souped up, but the dad says no, he'll go a much safer way, which is a tiny, fragile-looking helicopter, which essentially looks like a death trap.
This movie a couple of times does the criticizing of itself for me because I saw that helicopter and I'm like, that's supposed to be safer than a dune buggy. Yeah. And then Tom says, that's supposed to be safer than my dune buggy. I'm like, thank you, Tom.
It's good. It's almost quite meta for 1962 when it came out. But yeah, somehow they managed to get this tiny helicopter. It must have taken up most of the film's budget to hire this helicopter, I'm guessing. And they take it up to Shadow Mountain, and the dad goes off in a very kind of classic linen safari suit and pith helmet, which he just happened to have to go and hunt Eegah. He takes a camera with him and all this kind of stuff, and that's it. I think we see that Eegah notices the helicopter coming in, and that kind of frightens him off, and pretty quickly he manages to find the dad and sort of knock him out, and then it cuts away to some gratuitous swimwear shots where we have Roxy and some 60s chicks hanging out at the pool. We've got Tom in his kind of surfer shorts, and he's like wailing away on his guitar with some super 60s music that he's clearly written himself.
For so long. No.
Oh, God, and it's so rubbish as well. I mean, reading up afterwards that the guy that plays Roxy's dad is the real-life dad of the guy that plays Tom. And he's also the guy who plays Roxy's dad is also the producer of the film. So Tom in this film is a nepo baby. I mean, this is not something that is new to the 2000s, but this happened way back then, and that's why he's like the main character in the film, and that's why they're showcasing his rubbish music.
And I was reading up on these two guys, Arch Hall Sr. and Arch Hall Jr. The Junior had been in like a handful of movies in the early 60s and nothing after that. He was only in movies produced by his father, and his father was trying to make him into the next Elvis Presley, which you can really see in this movie. Like, he even mentioned his Elvis Presley LPs, right?
Totally.
And he has like 3 full musical numbers where he sings an entire song. It's like he really was trying hard.
Yeah.
But, you know, the Junior, after he didn't make it as the next big Elvis Presley, he went on to have a successful career as a commercial airline pilot, which is just kind of nice and interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Well, good for him. I mean, he's not a
That's
terrible
a way
actor.
more stable career.
he's not a terrible kind of actor. I mean, there's definitely, he's not Elvis, but he's, you know, he's at least as good as Cliff Richard, I would say, in that kind of similar style. And he's probably done more useful stuff than Cliff Richard has. Anyway, so we have this kind of classic swinging pool party where Tom is that annoying arsehole that always at every party gets on his guitar and plays the song that he made himself. But Roxy gets a phone call somehow beside the pool on like a really long cabled landline that the helicopter pilot is not feeling well, so they can't pick their dad up in the helicopter at the agreed time and place. So now Tom gets a chance to use his souped up dune buggy to go and pick up the dad. So off they go in the dune buggy, driving through the desert, racing over like tons of threatened desert plants that are really fragile, just like mowing them all down. That really pissed me off. All these kind of, you know, long-lived, fragile desert ecosystem plants. He just like flattens them in his dune buggy. And it looks like it's just the kind of chassis of a VW Beetle with some big wheels. It's not Grease Lightning, that's for sure.
No.
But anyway, so they get to where they're supposed to meet Roxy's dad, and he's not there, obviously, because he's been captured by Eegah. But Tom is prepared. They're going to wait it out. He's also brought a gun, because he's the kind of asshole that would shoot coyotes. And of course, he's brought his guitar. So it's time for another song. But yeah, so they're waiting for their dad. They go to sleep, and then Eegah finds them and eats their food, but then gets frightened and drops his club. But then Tom and Roxy wake up, find the club, get frightened that they think that the caveman's round and about. They throw his club away, all of about 2 feet. And then they drive off to try and just to get out of the way. But in their driving over, you know, how big are the California deserts? Several thousand square kilometers, I'd imagine. They manage to find Roxy's dad's camera, which is on the ground. And so then they decide the best thing to do would be to split up to try and find her dad. So Tom goes one way, Roxy goes the other. And of course, Eegah, the caveman, abducts Roxy and takes her back to his cave. And then we kind of get an insight into what's going on in the cave. Here we see the mummified like hominids from the opening credits. There's like 3 or 4 of them sitting there. Eegah talks to the mummies, and Roxy's dad has worked out that these are Eegah's ancestors, which is actually kind of quite interesting. I mean, this is not unheard of anthropologically. The sort of Ang people of Papua New Guinea, they smoke their dead relatives over a fire to preserve them, like as a kind of natural mummification, and keep them in the area and consult them for advice and stuff. So, you know, anthropologically, it's actually quite interesting to have this in a film. Makes a bit of sense.
I thought they were like stone sculptures. I didn't realize they were supposed to be mummies.
Oh.
The special effects aren't great.
No,
but
I mean, it's clearly just some sort of builder's foam with a skull on the top. But you know,
Right.
at least they've tried to make it interesting.
Yeah.
And this has all been worked out by Roxy's dad. He's got a broken collarbone, which he did himself when he fell over. It wasn't Eegah. And Eegah seems to be like really nice. He gives them some food and drink. They're totally not appreciative of the effort he's gone to as a single cave person trying to eke out a living in the desert. He's got some food for them, and he also has a special kind of freshwater spring inside his cave, which seems to be, you know, sulfurous mineral water essentially, which Roxy's dad, again, in another massive exposition to the audience, says this must be what keeps him so young. He's drinking this mineral water, and that's what's kept him alive since the Stone Age. So, you know, they found the Fountain of Youth again, I guess, tying into some of the other films that we've seen. And yeah, they kind of get an insight into Eegah's life and his background. He is the last, probably. That's what they surmise anyway. Roxy sort of bonds a little bit with him, decides to give him a shave, because why not? So
So weird.
she has...
Why did they have shaving cream?
Yeah, I don't know. But she does, or he does. So she gives her dad a shave, and she gives Eegah a shave. And that's nice. Eegah brings Roxy flowers. Roxy sings to him. They sort of bond, essentially. And all this is going on while Tom is uselessly trying to find anyone. He's just wandering around in circles, being a total waste of space. But Eegah likes Roxy, clearly. He loves her perfume. She sort of sniffs her, and she gives him her very fashionable 60s scarf, which is doused in perfume. He does sort of a little bit try to come on a bit too strong, but respectfully for a caveman. He's not as touchy-grabby as some of the other cave people we've met in previous films. And they Roxy and her dad sort of make up a plan that she's going to kind of seduce Eegah to go outside, and that will give time for Roxy's dad to escape. So they go outside. She's sort of enticing him along, and then he kind of is overcome by lust, essentially, and sort of starts to undress her. And I think the filmmakers are trying to give the impression that she's kind of into it. She's, she said he's cute. She doesn't seem to, it's very problematic, I think, is probably the best way to put it. This whole scene between Roxy and Eegah outside. But he's taken her outside. He's left the kind of cave entrance open. So Roxy's dad manages to get out. Their plan has essentially worked. But Eegah sees that he's just been tricked into letting the dad out, gets annoyed. Tom turns up at the last kind of moment, and sort of there's a little bit of a fight scene. Eegah's really wild that they're escaping. He picks up Roxy and goes off. Tom sort of races after them, but doesn't seem to be in any kind of rush. I mean, he sort of plods along after Eegah and Roxy as she's being kind of dragged away by this cave person.
But they're all like that. Like, even when the dad was getting captured, he was like, there was no emotion to it.
No.
And then when she got kidnapped and went into the cave and found her dad, it wasn't like, oh my God, Dad, I thought you're dead. She was like, oh, hi.
Yeah. Have you got your shaving stuff?
It was very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it. There's not a lot of kind of emotional pull or rush to action in this film, but Tom does chase after Eegah and Roxy, catches up with them. Eegah breaks his gun. Tom is no match for this guy, but he throws a stone at him. Maybe a biblical allusion. Maybe they're trying to say that Tom is like David to Eegah's Goliath. Eegah drops. He's like totally floored by this one tiny stone. But he's not dead, so that's great. And all three of the Californians, so Tom, Roxy, and Roxy's dad, escape to the dune buggy. And then we have a kind of comical, almost Jurassic Park style dune buggy escape where Eegah keeps catching up to them like some kind of T-Rex, almost catching them and being closer in the mirror than he appears. And, this buggy seems to be going at least sort of 30 miles an hour, but Eegah always manages to catch them up no matter how far they go. And they just kind of drive back into LA and sort of go about their normal life, go back to partying. Tom's got a concert on that evening at the club, which he just sort of goes to. But little do they know that Eegah has followed them all the way back. And he kind of, there's a few kind of comic interludes where he meets various LA residents, including a drunk and some other folk as well. And he kind of just wanders around downtown LA, this sort of 7.5 foot tall guy, clean shaven now, with a club and a loincloth, and some fur boots as well. He's got some nice fur boots. And somehow, I think it's sort of suggested that he follows the smell of Roxy's perfume or something. He manages to find the club where they're all at. They're having this pool party where Tom and his band are playing. They're dancing in a very 60s style, doing the twist, doing the mashed potato, doing the Batusi, all these kind of 60s dances. It's very happening. And so Eegah gets to the pool. They find that one of Tom's bandmates has been hitting on Roxy. Tom and him have a fight, very choreographed. Gets thrown into the pool. There was really no point to it at all.
Comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, there's no point. There's no lead up. The guy doesn't even get a name. He just dances with Roxy and then gets punched into the pool.
I don't even think he gets a line.
No. Well, maybe he asked her to dance, I think.
Tom leaves the band. He hands his guitar to somebody else. Then
Yeah.
the other friend hands his bass to somebody else, or a guitar, whatever he's playing. Tom's dancing with his girlfriend. The other guy comes up, starts dancing with his girlfriend. And then Tom's like, I'm going to fight you. And then they get into a fist fight. Like, there's nothing building up to that at all in the entire movie.
No.
Maybe it's just still trying to make Tom seem like, the tough
Yeah,
cool guy.
that'll be
hero.
exactly what it is. And so the police are called because the Eegah's on the loose. He gets into beside the pool. He kind of throws a few people into the pool. Weirdly, Eegah knows to kind of hide from the police. He's been like in the Californian desert since the Paleolithic, but he knows that the police are bad news. But Eegah tries to get Roxy. The police turn up at the last minute, and as Josh was saying, like King Kong, they shoot Eegah, and he dies in the pool, which is sad. And that's the end. I mean, it's not a lot happens. It's all stuff that we've kind of seen before. It's not done in a particularly interesting way, but I guess for the time, it might have been a good B movie. There's some interesting bits in it. So there's I kind of skipped over it.
There's no jokes. There's no
not deliberate anyway.
And even the exciting parts that were supposed to be exciting, the acting, they just like downplayed the emotion in it. So it wasn't even exciting, right? Like if they're not worried, why are you not? Why would you be worried?
Yeah. There's a nice bit towards the end, which I didn't mention, but where they're talking about Eegah, and they decide not to tell anyone about him. This is Tom and Roxy's dad, and they have a discussion about whether they should go to the police or the authorities to tell them that there's a 7.5 foot tall cave person just west of LA. And they decide not to, which is almost a bit kind of sensitive for the time, that they sort of think that, why can't we just let him be? It's fairly progressive for the times. I thought that was quite nice. But yeah, it's a terrible film, but it has some kind of very off its time moments as well.
But I guarantee that by tomorrow I'll forget I've ever seen it.
Even hot Eegah, you're going to forget about him and his hipster cafe?
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of this podcast, we normally start with nitpicking. This movie is about a caveman, and it gives us pretty much nothing scientifically to discuss. The explanation is entirely biblical. No. Even in that scene in the cave when the father is mansplaining Eegah to his daughter. It's his daughter, right? I get confused because we have to talk about the sexual chemistry between these characters at some point, right? But even in that scene, I'm like, oh, great, here's our exposition dump. Because so many of the movies that we watch at some point have, one scene which is scientific exposition to explain everything. And there's nothing scientific in it. It's his name must be Eegah, because that's what he keeps saying. I'm like, oh, yes, just like normal people who just like repeat their own name over and over. That makes sense. He must have survived forever because there's sulfur water in here. Like, oh yeah, of course, sulfur water makes you live for 10,000 years. That makes sense.
Yeah.
We don't get any explanation other than it says so in the book of Genesis. There were giants on the earth in those days, and like that's it. So like, we don't really have anything scientifically to discuss. They do mention, they probably mentioned Lascaux. He has some cave paintings.
Oh yeah.
And
which look nothing like Lascaux.
Yeah. The Roxy says, like that cave in France, and her father says, oh yeah, same style. I'm like, no, this is not the same style. These are children's stick figures.
Okay, but was it there a pig? Was there a flying pig?
No, it was not a flying pig. I saw that. I'm like, he drew a flying pig, and Roxy's like, it's me in my car. And I'm like, oh, she can tell that that's her in a car when it looks exactly like a flying pig.
I was thinking, because that was my thought. I thought that was maybe one of the only funny jokes where he was like, yeah, like there's a stone man living here when pigs fly, right? I don't know.
Might have been funny, but no, that was a picture of her in her car, and she could tell that it was her in her car.
Jeez. Yeah, the cave art is terrible. It's nothing like any cave art, really. Possibly some of the sort of Neolithic stick figure drawings a little bit, but still they're all much more accomplished than this. But going back to the sexual tension thing, I read somewhere online that apparently the way that he financed this cheaply, essentially, the Arch Hall Senior, Roxy was his secretary, and he cast her as the love interest for his son.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we don't need to go any further into that.
Yeah.
Apparently, this was featured on a classic episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. And I didn't watch that one, but I think it's up on YouTube. So I might have to go back and watch that if I can manage to watch this a second time. But apparently in that episode, they talk about this weird sexual chemistry between the father and daughter all throughout it. So that's one of the things that people pick up on this. When she shaves him, okay, so this is one of the scenes that makes this movie a cult classic for some people. He has a broken collarbone, he says, right? And let me see where I wrote this in my notes here. He's got a broken collarbone, so he's not feeling too well. And she says, "What can I do?" And he says, "Nothing, I'll just sit here." And then she says, "How about if I washed your face or gave you a shave? That'll make you feel better." And he's like, "Okay." And I'm like, why would a daughter wash her father's face or give him a shave to make him feel better about his broken collarbone? And then she does
so
shave
weird.
him. And have you ever seen the episode of The American Office where Steve Carell is leaving and they're going to replace him with Will Ferrell as the new manager? And he comes into the office and he hosts a meeting where he's getting shaved by a barber with a straight razor. And everyone's like, "Oh, total power move." And then Michael, the boss, hears this. So he gets his secretary, Erin, to shave him with a disposable Bic razor and a can of shaving cream in the office while he's giving a meeting. And she's just got shaving cream everywhere. She's like, "I have to finish your lips." And he's like, "Don't shave my lips." That's what this scene is like. This daughter shaving her father is covered in shaving cream. Her hands are just totally covered in shaving cream. And again, the movie is criticizing itself for me because it cuts back to them in the cave. She's totally covered in shaving cream, shaving upwards against the grain. He's like, "Shave down." She has no idea how to shave a beard, and I don't know why either of them thought that was a good idea.
Could it be like some kind of, like Quentin Tarantino always manages to get some kind of scene in his films where he ends up fondling one of the actress's feet because that's his thing? Could this be something like that?
Maybe we have to watch all 6 of Arch Hall Senior's other movies and see if he gets young actresses to shave him. I think the only reason that they did this was so that they had an excuse to get rid of Richard Keel's beard so you could see his attractive face for the rest of the movie. I think that's the only reason.
I think I prefer that reason.
Yeah. It didn't work, though. It was weird.
There were some good wildlife shots in this that I noted, which were at least appropriate to the place. Like quite often in films, we hear out of place bird calls or out of place animals, but they had a shot of a Gila monster towards the end, which is only found in the sort of southwest US, the largest lizard in continental US, and poisonous as well. No, sorry, venomous. Let me get that. Make sure that's right. So they're venomous. They have a venomous bite. They also have a shot of a horned toad, which are also found in the area as well. There are those really cool little lizards that can squirt blood out of their eyes as a defense mechanism.
Whoa, cool.
So yeah, that was nice. That's about the only kind of factual bits that I was wanting to talk about.
For me, it was the club. Like this is such like a cartoonish thing that he carries around, this big bulbous club.
Which he never really uses, does he?
I don't know where that idea came from. No.
Well,
he's not really very aggressive, right?
No.
Sexually aggressive, but...
It's been pointed out that the budget for this movie was so small that he probably wasn't allowed to break anything. He's...
Where will we get another stick?
Yeah.
We can't afford another stick.
Yeah, so you mentioned how Arch Hall Sr. was able to finance this and get it done really cheap. It cost him $15,000 at the time, which with inflation translates to $150,000. which is, I don't think it's the lowest we've seen, but it's pretty low.
Most of that's got to be on helicopter hire, surely.
Probably, right? Like how helicopters in 1962 were still pretty new technology, right?
Yeah.
Did we ever see the helicopter fly, though, or did he just get into it?
We did see it fly, I think, yeah.
We did? Mm.
There's obviously some other problems with this movie. So did you notice that a large amount of this movie was really badly overdubbed?
No, I just thought that was YouTube. I think I probably
I was watching it at 1.5 speed. I did not notice that.
I read this on IMDb. I couldn't find a lot about this movie anywhere else, but apparently there was a problem with the shooting where they didn't get audio and they didn't realize it at the time they were shooting. So they shot like a huge proportion of this movie and then later in the studio realized they didn't get any audio recording to go along with it. So they had to redub most of the movie, and a lot of it is really badly done. There's a really famous part when they're first getting out of the dune buggy. No, it's when they go in the car in the first place to investigate the spot where she hit the caveman. And the father says, "Watch out for snakes," but his mouth doesn't move at all.
See, and with stuff like that, this should be such like one of those movies that's so bad it's funny, but it's just so boring that it's not.
Okay, we also talked about these musical numbers. There are 3 full songs that Arch Hall Jr. sings, but we didn't mention that in the first 2 of these songs, he's playing a guitar all by himself, but there is a full band backing him up just out of nowhere. Like the first one is by a pool, and he's playing a Fender Jazzmaster plugged into an amplifier beside the pool. That's like my favorite style of guitar. I've never owned one, so not in terms of sound, but in terms of how cool it looks. Fender Jazzmasters, I think, are the coolest guitar. So he wins me over with that. But he's playing guitar by himself by the pool, but he has a full rock and roll band with backup singers playing behind him. And in that moment, it's like, it's fine. It's a movie. It's the 1960s. The second part is when they're out in the desert. He's playing an acoustic guitar, but it's still a sort of slower, surf rock and roll style song playing with no acoustic guitars in it, with a full band and backup singers. But while he's singing this song, an entire song again, right? Like 2 verses and 2 choruses, right?
So long.
It cuts away a couple of times to Richard Keel, to Eegah walking around the desert. And when it does so, the music sort of gets quieter, like you're listening to it in the distance. And Eegah's like, "Where's that music coming from?" But it's like, he's like, "I hear an entire rock and roll band coming across the desert."
What was the lead girl's name?
Roxy.
Roxy,
yeah, because the song that he sings in the desert is a song about a girl named
Valerie.
Valerie. And so
None of the songs are about Roxy.
I know, but it's so funny because it seems like it should be a romantic thing because she's acting like it's romantic.
Yeah.
But it's all just about another woman or whatever, right?
The first song he sings at the club is about Vicky, I think. And the second song he sings is about Valerie. And this is, again, where the movie is criticizing itself because he finishes the song and Roxy says, "Who's Valerie?" And he's like, "Wouldn't you like to know?"
Yeah.
But then the third song he sings is at the club again. And when he finishes the song, he goes to find Roxy, who was possibly not paying attention to his liking, and he says, "I was belting out a tune just for you in there." So he's sung a song for Vicky and a song for Valerie. The song that he was belting out just for Roxy was about Brownsville Road. It has nothing to do with a girl at all. Like, you could have reorganize these songs and, change the names in them to match your girlfriend in this movie. Your father wrote the movie. You could have fixed that.
Yeah. Why does she have to be called Roxy? Why couldn't she be called Valerie? I mean,
yeah.
Why not just change the name of the character? Jeez.
Yeah. So these were songs that were already out there. They weren't written for the show.
I didn't dig into this part, but this guy had a band called Arch Hall Jr. and the Archies, Archers, yeah, Arch Hall Jr. and the Archers. And I think I read somewhere that no music from them was ever released until like the 2000s.
Whoa.
Huh.
So maybe these songs exist, but they weren't, as far as I know, recorded at the time. Like I said, his father was really trying to make him into Elvis, and they were unsuccessful in that.
Which, I mean, to give him some credit, he at least could act a little bit and could sing a little bit. He wasn't super terrible. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit.
No, he was probably one of the two best actors in it.
You mean of the three actors that are in it total?
There's four. Roxy and her
four.
dad were terrible.
Yeah. There's only a couple of other things that I kind of made notes of. One of which is that, so the explanation for Eegah as a giant is the biblical one. And the reason that they first know that he exists, well, people other than Roxy, is because they find his footprint. And this is something that actually maybe has a little bit of grounding in reality. So in the US in particular, but other places too, but the US in particular, people often have claimed to find giant footprints. These are things that are fairly easily manufactured, but there are some real examples of giants' footprints that have been found in places like Nevada, New Mexico, and places like that, which were at the time a bit of a mystery because they were found under fairly controlled conditions. They looked like human footprints, but they were clearly, thousands of years old and clearly enormous. So the one that I'm thinking of in particular is from Carson, Nevada, where they found a whole set of giants' footprints, which were a kind of local 7-day wonder. But they turned out to actually be the sort of fossilized footprints of giant sloths. So giant sloths are more real than giant humans. But giant sloths have an interesting kind of locomotion, which is that they walk kind of on the outsides of their feet. They're kind of bipedal, and they walk on the outsides of their feet almost as if they have kind of club feet. Their feet are rotated around the ankle, so their toes are sort of parallel to the ground. And just the indent of the side of their foot looks remarkably human-like when it fossilizes. So there are giant footprints in the kind of southwestern desert of the US, but they're giant sloths rather than giant humans.
Interesting.
There is also a archaeological conspiracy theory that there were lots of giant skeletons found in the Americas in previous centuries, and that they've been covered up, and the Smithsonian has destroyed all the evidence.
Yeah. I mean,
my grandma used to always forward me emails with like those really Photoshop pictures of somebody standing beside a huge skeleton, and she would be like, "Is this real?" I'm like, "No, Grandma, it's not real."
And then she's like, "When did they get to you, Kim?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that you see that kind of every other day on the web, like badly photoshopped enormous skulls, which would collapse into themselves if they were real. And having been behind the scenes of many museums, I've never found a giant. Sadly, it would be big news.
They destroyed them all.
That's right. They were so good at covering it up.
But again, there's that whole thing like, why are we covering it up? That would be an amazing find.
Exactly, and it's weird that we found so many, yet all the many biblical creationists that are doing real research have never managed to find one.
I know, so we went and we got them all quickly.
That's it. We dug all of them up and we destroyed all of them, so that's the poor, Discovery Institute scientists in inverted commas can't find any more.
Yeah.
Terrible. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, so Kim, you were asking why cavemen have clubs, and I don't really know, but I think it might have something to do with there's quite a famous image, which I've just done a quick Google search for and can't find, but it's a woodcut image of the sizes of biblical giants. So kind of going back to biblical giants, so people like Methuselah and Noah and Goliath and all these Old Testament figures which were supposed to have been giants. And the woodcut that I've seen and can't find at the minute has them all leaning on clubs that are the size of like full-grown trees, as a kind of way of scaling them. I will do some more Googling to see if I can find the image, but I'm wondering, I mean, this is like a kind of late medieval woodcut image, which I'm sure would have been widely circulated. So maybe that's where it comes from, the idea that cave people
maybe
and giants have clubs.
Interesting. Yeah, because there's like the whole, they club the women over the head and pull them into the cave, and So
By the
strange.
hair.
Like, I don't know where. Yeah, by the hair, yeah.
I guess also a club is an unsophisticated tool, so it's supposed to imply that they're not smart. They don't have technology to make any kind of better tool. It's about the simplest weapon you can make just by finding a heavy stick.
Yeah.
So they reference the Bible twice, the same passage in this. Early at the beginning, he says, it says so in the Bible. And then at the end, after he's dead, somebody at the party says, was he real? And like the body's right there, right? But he's the father says, yes, he was real. It says so in the book of Genesis. There were giants on the earth in those days. Chapter 4, verse 32. There is no chapter 4, verse 32 in Genesis. The actual passage is chapter 6, verse 4. And in the King James Version, it says, there were giants on the earth in those days. But it continues, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Obviously, it's not talking about cavemen in the rest of the passage. But other versions of the Bible, most versions translate this as giants, but the word in the original is Nephilim. And I don't know if we've talked about Nephilim before, but this is where we get into ancient aliens.
Those are half angel, half humans, right?
Yeah, if you don't buy into the theory that they are half alien, half humans, which is what the aliens want, right. The ancient aliens want you to think.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, I don't really have much to say about that, but
really,
other than just pointing out, we can always tie in ancient aliens somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's weird to me that they use this passage to support the fact that a caveman would exist when, like, we know cavemen existed because we have their skeletons, but the passage is just saying that giants used to exist, and clearly it's not talking about cavemen. So I don't know. I don't know why they tried to put these two things together. It's really weird to write a caveman movie where, you know, we've seen these all the time where they have some exposition to scientifically explain this caveman. And this movie has no science at all. It's just, here's a Bible quote that doesn't actually support what we're saying, but whatever.
And it's not even the right passage.
It's not even the right passage, yeah.
It was a lot of odd choices in the making of this movie.
But good choice in Richard Kiel. I mean, he was probably the best thing in it, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this may have been his first big movie. There was something I read that suggested that Arch Hall Sr. found him as a bouncer at a bar, and he's like, I have to make a movie about you. But he obviously has credits earlier than this movie in TV, so he must have already been working as an actor.
Right. It's interesting to see as well how different he looks as a young man than he does, you know, in sort of middle age and later when in the James Bond films and in Happy Gilmore.
Oh yes, he was in that. Yeah.
And I think that's probably because his gigantism, which I think is fairly accepted, was acromegaly, which is
no, it's pituitary.
It's a pituitary. Okay, but some of the symptoms are probably similar, aren't they? Just kind of extra growth at the growth plates, which leads to kind of enlarged jaw, enlarged forehead, enlarged hands, and that kind of alters the appearance as you get older because it doesn't stop growing, which it does normally in people. And I think it's also nice that he's mostly portrayed as non-violent and peaceful. The real dicks in this film are the police and Tom with his coyote shooting gun. Like Eegah takes in a couple of people that are injured and lost, feeds them and gives them drinks.
He gets a bit gropey, but you know,
maybe
that was his. Like maybe that was what was polite in his.
That's it. Cultural misunderstanding.
Society.
It could be.
Yeah.
He introduces them to his mummified relatives. He gets a real bum deal, shot in cold blood at a hip swinging party.
I think, the real problem with this movie is that there isn't really a cohesive story. Like, there's no point to this movie other than as a vehicle to showcase his son's guitar playing, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's really what the whole point was. And the rest of the movie suffers because they didn't bother writing a story that really makes a lot of sense or is, you know, original in any way.
Yeah. There's no like lesson learned or big statement or Like, there's nothing like that.
Well, do we have anything else to say?
No, I mean, I think we've said more than than the movie even merits, because it doesn't even say anything.
Yeah, it's just the story we've seen a whole bunch of times, but done maybe earlier than most of them.
Mm.
Still not as bad as Neander Jin.
Nope, definitely
No.
not. And I don't think it really deserves 2.2 on IMDb. I think it's we could at least push it to 3 or a 4, and definitely it should be well above Neandergen.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of the worst movies of all time. It's
No.
bad in a lot of ways. It's
not the worst movie we've seen for this.
It's technically bad in a lot of ways. I mean, like the fact that they had to overdub more than half the movie is a pretty big problem.
But again, there wasn't anything that like made me angry, or like it wasn't like some of the movies are offensive or whatever.
Yeah, considering it's from 1962, it was fairly unproblematic apart from perhaps.
Yeah, but that's also just because nothing happened or was said, right?
Yeah.
Like, big chunk of the movie was just that guy singing.
Yeah, there's a lot of filler too. Like I said, some of it's so bad it's good, and then the rest is just really boring filler. The dune buggy montage is 2.5 minutes of just driving a dune buggy in the desert with surf music in the background.
Over threatened desert plants.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
I don't think so. Sorry, I'm half asleep. I've had a few gin and tonics and a beer, and I'm...
That's exactly the right number for recording a podcast, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do
Oh, we definitely should.
drug podcasts.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Every time we see a scientific inaccuracy, we have to take a drink.
Oh, God.
And we have to choose a movie that won't actually give us alcohol poisoning.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestonage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca.
Cool. All right. Well, will we stop Audacity then? It's about an hour.
Yeah, that's good enough.
That's certainly what Arch Hall said for most of the filming of this, I think.
Yes.